Morning, everyone. Welcome to the TELSIG podcast. I'm joined today by Dr. Pauldy Otermans and Dr. Stephanie Baines again, who you will remember probably from a recent webinar that we did on their AI literacies research that they're running at Brunel University. Both psychology lecturers, is that?
Yes. Yeah. We are both academics in the division of psychology.
Okay, so Pauldy, you'll also be quite familiar to the audience as well with your work with Otermans Institute and your development of small language models, which you've been on and talked to us a little bit about before. We're going to expand a little bit on the webinar that you delivered, and I'll have full information below in the show notes and links to anything that we talk about here research-wise. We'll go into some of the details on how you've actually set up this literacy course from your students. But I'd like to start, if we can, just by getting both of your takes on academic literacies in general. And as subject matter experts, I think, Pauldy, you've also got background in neuroscience. Is that right?
Yes, and Steph does as well.
Right. So are these things that you teach as well, or is your teaching research mainly still psychology?
From my point of view, I mean, Steph, feel free to add your subject because we don't teach all modules together. We teach quite a few. We teach academic skills, employability skills, research methods, very much focusing on the qualitative research method side of things. But both of us have a background in cognitive neuroscience, and we try to often use certain not technologies, so theories or frameworks from that knowledge base that we have, even if we're teaching something like academic skills or employability skills, so that these are not seen in isolation from the psychology and the neuroscience modules that the students get. So they see the link and how this can be also used in their skill development. Because often the students don't see that, and then they're like, oh, why do I need to know this? But if we bring in the psychology, they're getting more enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I wanted to kick off with, just by getting a view from both of you on what you see as valuable academic skills and what we see as transferable academic skills. So when you're teaching your subject specialism, presumably we can't just throw content knowledge at them. It's they need to know how to process it. They need to be versed in sort of academic cultures and the kinds of things that we're asking them to do, and really understand why we're asking them to do these, the kinds of assessments, the learning methods that we teach. And that usually takes a kind of academic literacies course, which we sometimes put alongside it. So yeah, could you just, both of us, I'd be interested to hear your views on this. What do you value in students and their academic skills when they come to you to be taught in your subject-specific domains?
So I get them when they first arrive for academic skills in their very first year at university, and then Pauldy takes them for academic skills in their second year. So one of the things that we really notice is that often our students come to us with a really varied background. So they might have had very different experiences before they arrive at university. So one of the first things that we try and do is to make sure that everyone has the same kind of baseline level. So it means that we try and teach them things that, okay, some of the students will say, oh, I've done this before. Things like how to find a research paper, how to cite it, how to think critically, and even things like how to take notes during lectures, because some students arrive thinking they've got to kind of try and copy down every word verbatim, and that's never going to work in a lecture. So we try and give them a really solid foundation of the skills that they'll be using across their degree and beyond. And we try wherever possible actually to do, as Pauldy said, to kind of link things to the psychology content that they're going to be learning, to the assessments that they're going to be doing, and to explain why you might need this later in your career. So, we say, okay, you're going to be doing an essay for this subject. Let's show you how to find research papers, try and assess those papers to see if they are useful ones, or maybe we don't trust them so much. How do you think critically about the material there? How do you extract the key material? All of these kinds of skills that they need to build up as they're going on. And if they see the relevance to assessments and to skills that they're going to be using in their graduate life, then I think that really helps to engage them more, because they see that it's not just us telling them something that's pointless, but actually it's something that's really useful.
Pauldy, is that similar from your view?
Yeah, I can definitely echo what Steph said. And maybe just to add from my point of view as well, is that, these teaching sessions and this curriculum is not set in stone. Right? We have to every year update it to see, are these skills still relevant? What are the assessments the students are getting in the other modules, so that we can support these module leaders in the skills that the students need for these assessment hour blocks. So the module leader and the other ones will focus on the content, while we focus on developing the skill set that the student needs surrounding that assessment. So for example, this year, the students in year 1 they already had to do a mock job interview, which is ours. So we know that very well. But this year, they also have to do 2 other visual presentations. It's called specifically vague. So we're still working with those 2 other module leaders to see what is that going to look like. But again, we will develop these teaching sessions to support the students to be able to have the skills to create these visual presentations, whether it's like an infographic or like a video that you may post on Instagram. But the content is delivered by the others, like the neuroscience or the social psychology or whatever module that may be. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing, we also need to constantly look at what do employers actually want from our students. Yes, they want the subject knowledge, but that's a given if you study a particular subject. So what are the other skills that they're really looking at? And we've seen in the past few months that many more job descriptions that we also use in our modules and our assessments say something along the lines of AI literacy, or being able to use AI tools. So we're embedding many more of these now in the curriculum, not only in teaching sessions, but also in assessment too. So it is very dynamic and it keeps changing, but I guess that's also fun.
Yeah. So your recent presentation was on developing specifically your AI literacies course with the students. I mean, so we'll dive into that, and I've just resisted saying the word delve, but we will get into that in a second. But when you were running the academic skills sessions before AI became the buzzword, and we were focusing on all the things you've just been talking about, like looking at the assessment requirements for the other modules that they're working on, looking at skills that are going to be useful for the jobs market in the future. Do you see a lot of these skills as being very subject specific, or are there things that we can safely say, right, we'll give you a grounding in things like critically appraising research content that is just transferable enough that you can send students in multiple different directions?
I think one of the key things for psychology as a discipline is that it is so broad that actually we can't pinpoint 1 or 2 specific careers that our students will go into. They go into a really wide range of careers post-graduation. So actually very few go on to be psychology researchers, but they go into things like marketing, recruitment, HR, into the finance sector, or they might want to be a psychology wellbeing practitioner or this sort of thing. So we try to make sure that we do give them a really solid base of transferable skills that will be useful whatever they do. So, for example, the presentation that Pauldy just mentioned, we're teaching them how to create and edit videos and create really powerful graphics that are going to be useful if they want to do something like social media content creation, for example. So I think it's all about skills that they can use whatever they want to do, rather than only skills that will help them with psychology.
Yeah, and I think just maybe again to add, I think we don't maybe teach them all the skills. So we might not focus on how AI can help them to code, because many of the students they don't get any coding in the program. And the few that really like it, they have found their own self-learning, independent study things. But otherwise, I think as Steph said, it's anything. It's about everything from visually presenting something, infographics, blog posts, videos, in-person presentations, all the way to writing things like a traditional essay that we still also test them on, the ability to write academically, but also maybe a blog post or a 500 words concise summary, because that's maybe what you'll be asked to do in a job. I don't think many employers are going to ask you to write, a 2,000 word paper that you need to present on a particular theory. So we try to see how we can work with all the colleagues across the program. And of course, it's an undergraduate program, so there are many modules, and see that the students get the right skill set and the diverse skill set that they need in the job where they go into, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I think the idea of the 2,000 word essay is something we were just chatting on a previous episode. I was kind of defending it because I think we tend to think that the traditional essay has passed its sell-by date, perhaps. But there's the guest I was speaking to, this is Dr. Zoe Handley on the last episode. We were just saying there's a huge value in going through the writing process, in really kind of consolidating the ideas in your mind that you've absorbed through your reading, research, and all the experience of going through university, and you sort of distill all your thoughts into a 2,000 word paper. There is a huge value in that. So yes, you're right. We obviously they're probably not going to be doing that in the jobs market, but it really helps you think about your area of expertise. What's the state at Brunel at the moment with regard to these kinds of assessments? Are they still part of the mix, or are they being sort of moved aside?
Do you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, they're very much part of the mix. It's, creating a balance between what one would call a traditional essay and a super authentic assessment that almost is something they would be doing in an actual job. But we also still have, exams that are often seen by people to be very traditional and AI resistant because they take place, in a room where you come with your laptop and you do the exam. So it is understanding and fine-tuning that balance as well, and see, what it is that you need to test your students on. If you really want to test the knowledge, which we often do in year one, right? Where they need to describe, they need to learn a lot of new concepts because, at the first year of university, there's a lot of things to learn. So we may still use, sort of these MCQ exams where we just can test that knowledge. Well, I'm not saying easily, that it's easy to set them an MCQ exam, but, they come to the exam while they do that. But on other hand, we may give them a data set and say, you need to analyze this and present it to us like if I was your boss. So, that is a totally different way. And I think finding that balance is not always easy because it's often easier to stick with what one would call the traditional ways of assessment because we've been used to them. And also they're easier to set up because having to organize 200 individual student presentations in person in a particular room is a bit of a nightmare, or can be a bit of a nightmare, working with, 8 different people that mark them, different rooms you need to book, different students that then have different problems that can't find the rooms. So, that for a lot of people may also sort of think like, well, that sounds a bit difficult to do. And I have so many students, if I just let them go into an exam and test the knowledge in that way, I've also met the learning outcomes. Because in the end, we always meet the learning outcomes. It's just how we do that. And if we invest enough time and resources into that, almost anything is possible, I would say.
Yeah, and if I can add to that as well, we've some of our other research is looking at assessment, and I mean it came from the starting point of authentic assessment. But what we've done is we've really mapped across our program and our colleagues in the biosciences division at Brunel, and what we think is really important is a kind of a scaffolding approach. So students will often come into university and all they've done before are traditional essays and traditional kind of exams. So they're used to going into an exam hall and doing an MCQ exam. They might never have written a reflection before or given a presentation or done something like a blog post or a video or something like that. So we can't throw all of this at them when they've just arrived. There's a concept of psychological safety where, if you give students assessments that they're not prepared for, that's going to be really distressing for them, and that you're not going to get the best performance out of them or the best learning. So what we've done is map across our program, and we have assessments that build on their previous experience and build on one another. So they might do a short presentation on their own. This is our mock job interview and assessment that Pauldy mentioned earlier in their first year, where it's just one member of staff and one graduate teaching assistant. Then in their next year, they give a little presentation to a small group of their peers. And so we build up and we have a really big range of diversity of assessments across the program as well. And there definitely is still the place for traditional essays where they do have to really use those critical thinking skills, pull out relevant information, not just give us a big stream of consciousness. And, those are relevant skills no matter what they're going to be doing afterwards either.
How much of this is, do you see language proficiency as an academic skill as well? I only ask because we've just talking to colleagues recently more in the English for Academic Purposes community. There's been a sort of slow but steady shift away from what we traditionally call language proficiency in the academic skills mix. So being able to range of vocabulary, for example, the accuracy of your sentence level grammar and those kinds of things, because we sort of assume now that students are using tools to such a degree that we don't need to teach these explicitly as much as we did when we're having these academic skills programs. What do you touch on this in your teaching? Is language proficiency something that you address still, and how important is it in some of the assessments that they're they're doing? So I suppose I'm talking specifically mainly about international students whose first language may not be English.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily teach it as such. So the short answer is no. But of course, we do other things. So the university has central services where we refer students to. So if we see that they're struggling with their English proficiency, so we have the academic skills department. We also have a language department. They can even take courses. They can do one-to-one support. We have the Royal Literary Fund Fellows. So we signpost them to all of these. But in the other thing I wanted to add is that in one assessment in year 1, in year 2, and in year 3, they are being assessed on their English proficiency. So these are assessments that all students need to take. And then part of the grade is how well they wrote. So that is grammar, spelling, the ability to construct paragraphs and sentences. And there is one more.
Paragraph. Yeah.
Structure. Yeah. So we do assess them on that in a rubric, and then we give them some feedback as well on how they could improve that. And then often if the writing or if the English writing is not that great, or we see a particular area that they should focus on, we then refer them to one of those central services of the university, and we sort of strongly recommend, because we're not forced them to go there, but strongly recommend them to go there. And also with the personal tutors in year 1, actually, something that I forgot to add as well is that they need to write a short essay in the first 4 weeks of the term?
That they typically do it about week 2 and get feedback about week 4. Yeah.
So that's another way where we can see right at the beginning maybe how great their English is, because we don't have that many international students in psychology as such, but the university as a whole has many international students. So there is a lot of support because the students come from many, many countries.
Right.
Yeah, and with that kind of assessment sounds too strong of a word, but that essay that they do within the first few weeks of arriving, it's supposed to be just a very informal text that they write. They kind of write about their hobbies or something like that, because you can actually tell quite a lot from an informal couple of paragraphs. And any students that are identified as needing extra support actually get referred to a specialist who can work with them. Originally, we tried doing this in groups. The students didn't really engage with that. So now they are being given one-to-one sessions, just a few of these to help them get up to speed with English proficiency. So whilst we don't teach it, we do everything we can to support students who are struggling in that area.
Cool. It's interesting to see that it's still a key consideration then presumably for the subject lecturers as well, when they're reading students' work, they're not just assuming that students are going to either translate from their own language, or they're asking for a level of proficiency in the language that students can operate. And
yeah, really being emphasized by the Office for Students as well as a kind of strategic importance that students are proficient with whatever language they're learning in higher education as well.
Unaided proficiency, I think, was the word I was reaching for there in my mind. But yeah, great. Okay, well, let's just jump into your research. So the research and the study that you carried out at Brunel is on the webinar, and I'll link back to this because people, while they remember it, should definitely check it out if you haven't seen it yet, because you go through the study that you did complete with PowerPoints and visuals and everything like that. But we'll just summarize a few things here, because you had you started off by doing you started off with a needs analysis with a fairly large sample size of students. Is that correct? And you looked at primarily their awareness of what AI tools are now that we're kind of putting these things like ChatGPT into the sort of bucket of what we call academic skills. So having sort of awareness of what these tools can do, their limitations.
Sure. So we did the original study back at the beginning of the previous academic year. And as you say, kind of at the time, ChatGPT was everywhere in the media. But what we found actually was that there was a really big range of awareness in our students, from some who said, oh yeah, I've tried out a load of different things and given them all a go and getting quite good at them, to students who said, does Siri count as AI? They really weren't sure what AI tools were and how to use them or anything like that. And I think we've kind of, we haven't run the full survey again yet, but we've been monitoring what our students know and understand, partly through giving teaching sessions with our students and through assessing them on using things like ChatGPT as part of their assessments. And we have seen the kind of the level of awareness rise a bit, but I think we're still going to end up with a big variation in what students arrive to us with in terms of AI literacy, particularly over the next few years. If we were to assess again in, say, 5 years, I think we'd see everyone having a higher baseline level of awareness. But we are going to assume that not all of our students will be aware or have experience with AI tools at the moment, and make sure that we build this into our teaching so that we're not leaving anyone behind simply because they haven't had the experience or the awareness.
So students are coming in, we're not assuming any kind of knowledge of AI. So just remind us a little bit about, I think you, when you presented, you talked about you had an AI session in the term. Is that right? Can you talk a little bit about where this is situated in the students' broader study, time-wise, and obviously links to everything else they're studying as well?
Yeah, that's actually a good question that we've reflected on quite a bit over the summer, because last year when we ran these sessions for the first time, so both in year 1, 2, and 3, we had one session as well. Sort of timetabling also only allowed us to do that last minute, squeeze that in as such. And that was sometime in the first semester. So it was a bit different for year 1, 2, and 3, just where did it fit best? Now, having done our survey, also focus groups, and doing some other projects and trying to keep up to date what the literature also tells us about the use of AI, we now in a few weeks when term starts, we actually have shifted these sessions to much earlier in the term. So this is now from memory, and maybe I'm a week off here or there, but for year 1, it's coming in week 3 already. So the first 2 weeks, we set the scene, introduce the modules, what we expect from them as a university student, start straight away, and, how to find literature, what is a reliable resource, what you should do and not do. And then we straight dive into, in week 3, okay, how do you use AI tools? So that is the first of 2. So the first one focused much more on the AI tools. What is there? Do you know what AI is? Because again, we're not sure what they know, because they come from so many different backgrounds, also educational backgrounds, that we want to make sure that at least in week 3, everybody knows the same thing, and we'll start playing with a few tools. Also telling them the university's policy on AI, which is quite important for them to know too. And then near the end of the first semester, so around, I think it's week 9, but it could be week 8 or 10 as well, we have another session where we delve further into use of the tools, doing more practice sessions, because we assume, and we have to see whether this assumption is right, that students will have been practicing with these tools themselves. We're going to give them a few examples and different ones that are all free to use, because we don't have any paid licenses for any of these tools. So we're going to really look at the free ones to make sure that everybody has the same access. And if someone doesn't want to sign up with their own personal email, if they're afraid of data and all of that, we are in the process of creating a few accounts that students can use if they don't want to use their personal email addresses or their student emails to do so. So those are in the pipeline. And because at the end of the first semester, they already need to submit an assessment in year 1 where they have to explicitly use an AI writing tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity, or we will give them probably 5 to choose from. So we already, delving straight into that in year 1. And then in year 2, Steph, you need to help me out here. Is it also at the beginning of the semester? I can't remember what we decided.
Yeah, it is. I think as within year 1, they will get 1 or 2 sessions in the first semester, and then another 1 or 2 in the second semester.
True, yeah, because in the second semester in year 2, they have to create a poster, like how you would go to a conference or an event, an exhibition, and you present your stuff on the poster. They now also need to create a poster, but unlike previous years where we give them, the corporate template, we are not doing that. We're telling them these are a few articles, you have to pick one. They can't just make a post on whatever they like, because that will make marking very difficult for us too. So they have 3 academic papers that are written by different members of staff across their division, so they can see a bit of the work that some of us do as well. They need to pick one, and they need to turn that into a poster using AI. Now, again, we're going to teach them a few AI tools, again, free ones that they can use. And they have to also, on the poster, as well as when they come in person to talk about that article, they have to also include a short reflection on how it was using that tool. So we also want them to reflect on maybe what went well or what didn't go so well, or just in general how they found it. So those are some specific sessions, very much tailored, but also even other sessions in year 1 where we have to help them with these visual presentations that they need to do in other modules. we again going to say, well, you can use AI tools. They need to, for instance, write a CV as well. Well, you can use these tools, but these are the downsides and these are the upsides. So we're trying to, I guess, use as many different examples as we can and practice as much as possible with them for them to understand what is good practice of AI and what is not so good practice. And in the teaching sessions, well, they can, if they say, oh, I'll just copy that, we can say, well, are you sure? Whilst then hopefully they don't do it on their assessment when it's too late. So we're trying to build as much as possible, but I think we'll see in December already how it has gone for this semester. And hopefully the students are much more averse in how to use these tools, but yeah, we can't say anything yet.
So are these sound very practical sessions? Are these based in a computer lab, or is it students bringing their own device?
Yeah, so mostly our students do bring in their own devices. We have a scheme where they can loan laptops as well. If they want to, they can sit there with a friend in the session and work on these things together, because we know they often like to do that. But generally, it's their own devices, yes.
How many sort of discrete learning outcomes have you got on this course at the moment? So we're talking about general familiarity with AI and a lot of it, which sounds, there are so many little rabbit holes that you could go down on an AI course. Have you tried to contain this within, like, let's say 4 bullet pointed learning outcomes, or what does the ultimate direction of this literacies course look like?
So we have 7 learning outcomes for the modules that these are embedded in, but some of them are not particularly relevant to the literacies part, because there's also research methods and things like that as well. But we have focused in on these skills specific learning outcomes, but these tend to be quite broad. So it's things like, the ability to use creatives or critical thinking and that sort of thing. So they're knowledge, cognition, and skills-based learning outcomes. So we can go more deeply into those. And what we've tried to do when we've been developing these sessions is really trying to work out what we need the outcome to be. So what sorts of skills do we need our students to have? What sort of knowledge and awareness do we need them to have? And also, there's such a big question that our students often have is, what am I allowed to do and what is kind of banned or not allowed? They're really, in general, scared that any kind of AI tool use might be perceived as academic misconduct. And I know that this has been a big theme in higher education since the explosion of Gen AI onto the scene. So we also focus in on that. We've always taught our students in these skills modules about what academic misconduct is and what they are expected to do and not to do with regards to that. So we also teach them some of that with regard to AI literacy also.
Okay, that's. I think you mentioned in the webinar, you talked a little bit about critiquing output and adding comments to so pasting output and adding comments on where they felt that. Were you looking more at students to identify hallucinations and factual errors or stylistic discrepancies in GPT output there?
Yeah, so I moderated these assessments. I'm really familiar with what the students were doing. So we've always wanted them to understand how to use track changes and comments, because that's an important skill when they get to their dissertation. So what we thought we could do was actually get a really practical use in this. And indeed, as you say, ask ChatGPT or a similar tool to give them an output on a particular topic that we have taught them on the skills module. They could pick any one they wanted, and then to identify things that they thought maybe weren't very good or were incorrect. So some of them picked up actual inaccuracies and hallucinations. Other things students often noted was, oh, well, this is quite vague, or this is a nice first sentence, but you would need to add an example here, and there are no citations and these sorts of things. So really, for them to be able to understand what the limitations were and what, if they're using these tools, they need to do to then make the output that they get as a starting point into actually a really good thing that they could submit if they're writing a report or an essay or a reflection or that sort of thing.
So how much more difficult did you think the international students found this than when you're working with the home students? And I'm thinking particularly about like linguistically processing the output of GPT, because as you say, I think one of the features of a GPT output, when you put an essay question in, for example, it leans towards the abstract quite heavily. So I don't know if that's changed a lot recently, but looking at like test things that I've put in, you'll get very generic output, thin on examples, quite abstract, which, while it's something that we're trying to steer the students away from, you might critique it and say, well, we need to flesh this out a little bit, add examples, add some real world details in there. But it's also quite tricky for international students to process that kind of level of abstract language. So how did you experience any of this? I mean, how did you, what was the general response from students, and was there any difference in how the international students and specifically the language learner students responded compared to home students who were less perturbed by the language side of things?
I think that's a difficult question because we don't have many international students. We do have a lot of students who speak, besides English, another language. And we actually don't really necessarily always have access to that data because marking is anonymous. So we just have a student ID. So if we wanted to do such analysis, we would probably get some permission somewhere to get these, this data. And I don't even know if the university captures what level of English each student has. So that is a little bit tricky for us to say. I think anecdotally, when we look at how the students are, interacting with us in the teaching sessions, I haven't picked up anything in terms of language from students. I don't know, Steph, I don't know what your experience was with that, because you have run some different sessions with them.
Yeah, for me, there wasn't anything that really jumped out in our particular cohort, but I know, because I sit in the boards of studies across the college and with my other hat on, I know that in previous years, one of the recurring comments was that the international students have often struggled with their assessments because actually their language proficiency maybe wasn't quite so high. And actually they're seeing fewer assessments coming in now that have had that same struggle. And I know sometimes when you're marking an assessment, the one thing that will leap out at you as being able to tell that it might be a student that English is not their first language is that they use, sometimes it's not technically an incorrect word, but you can tell they've kind of put it into a translator and it's come out with what a native English speaker wouldn't necessarily use. I've seen a little bit less of that this year, although we know ChatGPT often gives quite obscure language as well. And the assessments that come in that you think, oh, this was AI generated, it's usually because the language is obscure, but in a slightly different way. So I guess our hope was that it might actually equalize things a little bit and not disadvantage students so much who come from a background where English is not their first language. But I think it's going to take maybe a little bit of a while to see those effects filter through.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. You point that out about being able to pick out things that have been through a translator. I mean, this is a topic that's come up on this show a couple of times, and we've had Mike Groves and Klaus Munt, who've done a lot of research on the abilities of machine translation and how they've technically progressed over time, and they sit on some of the same technology that we deal with in AI now. And one of the observations has been that the level of sophistication has improved so much over the years that it really is hard to tell now. You used to be able to pick out clunky translations from Google Translate, but it's less able to do that. And now it's so polished and it really does sort of pass the smell test. It looks like, something that they translate to idioms and all. So, and that was one of the other things that's come up. The hopes, I think, for some of this technology was that it acts as a leveler. So international students and home students kind of have the same, international students aren't held back by their language ability so much as they perhaps were. But I just wanted to ask a question about the Something you mentioned in the webinar about some kind of links that you try to make between what you do now on the academic skills side of things and the tuition that you give students here and the modules that they're studying alongside as well. And you sort of gave you seem to suggest that there was quite a bit of dialogue that happens between the teaching teams that teach the same students. That's quite an achievement, I think, if you've done that, because I think it's very easy for, especially subject-specific lecturers, to sort of silo themselves sometimes, and they're very concentrated on the content that they have to deliver, and thinking about how it connects to the other modules that students might be taking, and how transferable some of the knowledge is, and opportunities for interdisciplinarity is quite hard for them to incorporate into their teaching as well. So could you just expand a little bit on that? How much success have you had with that? How dialogical are the teaching teams at Brunel there? And have you had a lot of success in getting other modules to kind of make these links to what you're covering on your academic skills program?
I think both Pauldy and I have been quite proactive in reaching out to our colleagues and saying, look, this is what we're going to be teaching them on academic skills. What do you need for them to know for your assessment? I think it helps that we're involved with a lot of modules on the program. But also we both know the program inside and out as well. So we know where those linkages are, and actually working together and, setting up a call with people to say, what do you need? How are you going to proceed this year? We've also been actually redesigning our program because our university is going through a credit restructure. So actually the way that our modules have been reformed has actually necessitated a lot of these conversations, but we've also then tried to make sure that colleagues are really involved in the direction that their module takes, and also in understanding what the students will need in terms of skills. But we've traditionally on our program as well had what is maybe a slightly different approach to what you might see in some other universities, in that we often have what we call study blocks and assessment blocks. So they might learn the content for, if I use as an example, one of the modules I teach is social psychology. So I teach them that. A colleague teaches them individual differences, but they're actually assessed synoptically for social psychology and individual differences. They're assessed synoptically for cognitive psychology and biological psychology. So this has also meant that it's harder for colleagues to work in silos, because they have to know what their colleagues are doing in order to develop an assessment that is going to meet the learning outcomes overall for that assessment.
Pauldy, is that sort of chime with your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. And also it's not only within the year, but also across the year, so that modules in year one are often, well, it's not that it's a foundation module, that would not be sufficient to say, but it gives that basis. For instance, like brain and cognition is a module they have in year one, where they get to understand, they get an introduction to the brain and cognition, how these are together. And then year two, that Steph mentioned, biological and cognitive psychology, they build upon that knowledge that they have gained in year one. So again, these colleagues all need to then work together as well to see that there is not enough or not too much duplication, right? That we are pitching in at the right levels. And again, we always are there to support them if they need any support in that. But as Steph mentioned, we have very much focused in the last, 6 months or so, on the redesigning of the assessment in line with the new structure that the university looked at 1530 credits, and see how can we map the assessments then in a slightly different way, that because it's a good opportunity to redesign almost everything as such, right? To really, go through that with a critical point of view and see what else can we do. And we saw there, well, the skills that the students may need for their future jobs have been changing, and AI has come up a lot now as well. So we can embed that further, and let's see if we can make some assessments a bit more authentic to also make them a bit more, let's say, practical. So using all of these different elements, we'll see the outcome of it this year, because year one starts in a few weeks. So quite excited about that. And then just building up on that for year two and year three as well, because I think that's often very key. As you mentioned, Phil, a lot of academic colleagues, and we see that in level 6, there are year 3, there is a lot of isolation because the students choose optional modules. They need to pick 4 modules and a dissertation. Now, hardly any of these modules work together because the students can pick a variety. So, no one student has maybe the same modules, right? Because they do different things. So then you see more of that, let's say, isolation. So again, we then not say step in, but we then work with these colleagues and say, well, they already have this module, and we know a lot of students who take this also take this. So maybe we need to ensure that these assessments or the strategies behind these assessments are quite different, so that we make sure they develop different skills apart from the subject knowledge that they get in these subjects. So yeah, it's not an easy puzzle to solve, but it's nice to work with the different colleagues.
Yeah, I was about to say it doesn't sound particularly easy, and a big question there is how much agreement is there between the various subject specialists that you work with in terms of academic skills that they're looking for, things they prioritize, and now we've got how they feel about students' use of AI and the extent to which thresholds of acceptability and things like that. Is there how much agreement is there among teachers, and how much bridging of gaps do you need to do?
Maybe perhaps I can focus a bit on the AI stuff, and Steph, maybe you can focus a bit on the skills stuff, because the question it's quite a big question. I think when it comes to the AI, there is quite some differences. Of course, we have our university policy and guidance that we are allowed to use AI in our teaching and learning and assessment. So, but it's more on a sort of individual module level. People need to decide as such how they use it. So we have quite a lot of freedom as such. But some academics are embracing AI. They love it. They spend hours using AI tools themselves, even for their own research, and for their own development and their own learning. So they are more like the pros. And then we have colleagues that are like, oh, yet another technology I now need to learn. There are so many digital tools, especially after COVID, that we had to implement. We shifted to a new VLE. We're using different stuff in the classroom, whether that's Padlet and PebblePad and Paul everywhere. I know they all start with a P, the ones we use, but there are so many different tools that, one has been trying to use in the classroom that a lot of people are like, well, now there is yet something else, I'm giving up. And there is too many things. And then there are also people that say, well, I don't trust AI. I just know I am the subject expert. I don't trust what AI tells me because it hallucinates and, all the different problems that may come with it, biases, the ethical use of AI. So we have different points of views, not just within our division, but also within the university. And there it can sometimes be difficult to work with certain colleagues if they are, in those side of things that, I don't want to use AI because of whatever reason. So bringing those colleagues on board is often more difficult. And that's where we often say, well, you focus on your subject. We can deal with the AI related stuff that is related to your subject in our skills module. So sort of don't worry about it. And that may be a temporary solution, sort of putting a bandage on it, because I guess in the end, those colleagues also need to be brought up to speed because they all need to be aware of AI literacy as well, because otherwise, how can they support their own students if the students have queries? So it is a difficult one. I don't know, Steph, if you want to add something as well, also related to the skill side to it.
Yeah, sure. And I think actually the really nice thing is that our university is taking a really positive approach to AI as well, not a very kind of, oh, it's bad and it's the death of all education, but actually this is out there. Our students are going to be using it. So we as members of staff, we need to understand how these things work as well so that we don't portray a negative kind of opinion to our students. When it comes to the skills side of things, I think initially we met kind of not necessarily resistance, but we found that when we would go in to do teaching observations of our colleagues, for example, often they were then teaching how to write an essay and doubling up on what we were already teaching in the skills module. And I think it wasn't that they didn't trust us per se to teach the students this. I think it's just that they felt like they needed to be teaching them that. And if they didn't, the students wouldn't know how to write an essay, and they felt more comfortable knowing that they had built that into their content. And I think now that they've seen what we deliver and that the students come to them with the knowledge of how to write an essay, how to cite a source, that sort of thing, actually more and more they have been stripping that content out of their module, and now it is fully situated in the skills modules. because, we teach them that, and we work with our colleagues in professional services as well. So we have someone from the ASK team, the academic skills team, come in and do some of the writing specific module content. And we have our subject librarian, who's fantastic, come in and do finding sources, citing sources, how to use RefWorks, all of those sorts of things. And so I think they are seeing that the students are developing these skills. And so they are relinquishing that control and realizing that actually this gives them more time to give more of their content, subject-specific content as well. So I think the skills and the subject-specific content now sit much more comfortably together than they did initially.
I'm conscious now we've got Pauldy needs a break before our next meeting, so I'll wrap us up. But just quick final comments from both of you. If it'd be great to hear. Where is this going, and how do you see the course developing? Have you got any challenges that you'd specifically like to overcome on this?
You don't end with an easy question.
Oh, sorry. Pick and choose about
right.
what you will.
Well, I think this is actually quite an exciting time for education, where these graduate skills are ever evolving and rapidly evolving, as well as the use of AI, not just only within the teaching and learning and assessment, but also then again, when the students go into their jobs, whether it's during their studies or afterwards. And I think I find it exciting. I find it fascinating. I love AI, and I really, want to implement much, much more of AI in the education that we do, not just within our own programs, but, wider. And I think the challenge here is, not necessarily to convince other colleagues, because I think over time people will see the benefits, and as more also legislation, as this morning or yesterday, the first thing has been signed about the safety of AI in the UK. So at least we'll see what that leads to on a more local level. But I think the challenge will be to keep up to speed, because AI may do something this month, whatever it is, whether we're talking video, audio, text. But a teaching session may not happen until, or maybe has just happened, or may not happen until January. So, we need to keep up to speed and continuously updating our materials. And I think that will be the biggest challenge, to ensure that we are up to speed and that we can, quickly give that knowledge also to our students. And I think that might be tricky, because we are in these, semesters, and we are very much within a particular timeline in university. It's not the same timeline as technology is on. So that would be my piece.
And I think I'm quite on the same page with Pauldy here. I also think a sea change is always really exciting, and I'm really open to embracing the new things that are coming. And I think in terms of keeping up with rapid changes, I think it's really important that we maintain a really open dialogue with our students as well. I think because we convey to them that we're not kind of negative in our viewpoint of AI tools and the skills that they need to develop, teaching them how to create a TikTok video, for example, that kind of thing as well. If we're looking at other kinds of tools, they seem to feel quite comfortable talking to us about, I'd really like to learn this. And so what we've tried to do when we've designed our modules is to build some flexibility into them. So we might label a particular session, AI tool use, but actually if a couple of weeks before we're about to deliver that session, suddenly the students are all talking about this, that, or the other that is new and exciting, and they want to learn it, well, we can actually give ourselves the opportunity to build that into the session as well. Yes, it means that we might have to develop a session really quickly, quite last minute. We need to upskill ourselves as well. But I think if we can upskill ourselves and provide the skills that our students are actually wanting and needing and identifying as important to them, then I think that's a really exciting thing to be able to do.
Brilliant. There was there's so much more we could talk about in this, but it's very hard to develop materials for an AI course with durable shelf life, I guess, because it's just doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
The short expiry dates, yeah.
Yeah, thinking on your feet is the way to go. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much once again, Dr. Stephanie Baines and Dr. Pauldy Otermans from Brunel University. We'll, as I say, links and bios and everything that you're up to and all the details to your webinar will be in the show notes below. So just to say thank you very much again once for your time, and hope to keep in touch and find out how this is going And we'll probably have a very different conversation in a year or so's time once all the tech has changed yet again.
Thank you.
Thank you.